Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I'm going to be doing another book review for you, and that is for Spider-Man Hostile Takeover by David Liss. This is the first superhero novel that I have read. I've always been a fan of like Marvel superheroes, more so than DC, although I do enjoy a few, like I enjoy Batman and things. I've never been much of a comics person though, but I have always enjoyed the movies and the video games. And so now that I figured out that there are actually full novels based on these, Marvel has some and I believe DC has some as well, I decided I'm going to start trying some of them out. And this one in particular is a tie-in novel for the Spider-Man video game by Insomniac for the PlayStation 4. And the day that I'm planning to release this video, which is October 20th, is the release date for the very next Spider-Man game, Spider-Man 2, the brand new sequel to the game that this is based on, which I'm very excited about. And so I figured, what better way to celebrate than to read and review this book. So this is a prequel to the first Spider-Man game. I don't know the exact timeline of this, but I would assume it takes place somewhere around a year before the first game. I don't know the exact. I would say if I were to guess, probably 6 to 18 months before the first game would be my guess. And going into this, I expected to enjoy it, but I didn't have high expectations just because I figured this would probably be, you know, one of those tie-in books where it's like, okay, we've got this video game that's super successful, so let's just push out a book that the fans can buy, and, you know, we don't have to worry if it's that good or not, just put something out there that, you know, will make a little extra money or whatever. So I didn't expect it to be really great or anything, but I was excited to read it. I figured I'd enjoy it because I love those games. But I'm very happy to say I actually enjoyed this a lot more than I expected to. And I think that this is definitely, if you're a fan of the Insomniac Spider-Man games and you are into books, I think this is a good one to check out. And it was really good. So to get started talking about some positives for this book, which really is the vast majority of what I have to talk about. First of all, the most important thing I think for this book to get right was the characters, especially Spider-Man, obviously, but also other characters, Mary Jane, Jameson, Wilson Fisk appears quite prominently in this book, Yuri appears quite prominently in this book, Aunt May shows up here and there, even Mr. Lee shows up a couple times. So this includes a lot of characters from the first video game because it's a prequel to the first video game, and I think it really gets a lot of the characters really right. I think especially Spider-Man himself, Peter Parker. A lot of the book is written from his perspective, and I think the writing style really works for that. There's a lot of little jokes in the writing and things like that, and the way that he's written in terms of dialogue really works as well. You know, he's very heroic. He's, you know, trying to help people out. He feels you know, like he should, but he also has his little jokes and quips and things like that. He feels like the character from the video game was put directly to the page, which I think really helps in this book's favor, because if you're writing a book about Spider-Man, you want him to feel like Spider-Man. And I think he definitely did. And I would say that was the same case for pretty much all the characters that were in this book. I felt like the author really did a good job capturing what those characters are like and putting them in here, which is a very good thing because I think one of the strongest suits of Spider-Man for the PS4 was its characters and the way they were portrayed. Another thing I really enjoyed about this book was actually the plot, which early on I wasn't that into just because to me it felt a little bit goofy. But as it went along, you know, that kind of subsided and I was like, yeah, it's a little bit of a silly premise, but, you know, I'll go with it. So basically the premise of this book, this is basically the backstory for a lot of stuff that is mentioned in the first Spider-Man game. So this explains a lot of Spider-Man's history with Fisk. It explains why him and MJ are broken up and some of their history, things like that. And basically the main plot of this book is somebody is impersonating Spider-Man and doing some very, very, very bad things while impersonating Spider-Man that also then kind of turns the city against him a little bit. And Spider-Man has to figure out what's up with that. That's kind of the very basic overview of what this book is about. And I thought, you know, it was a little bit of a silly premise to me. I was like, yeah, the guy impersonating Spider-Man. It just felt a little weird to me. But I think it was done pretty well. And even, you know, those villain characters, the character who is goes by the alias of the Blood Spider. He was done really well in this book and had a very strong personality to him that was, you know, clearly not quite all there in the head. You know, the way that he acted, he was definitely not quite, you know, mentally stable and all these things, but he was still interesting to read about, and he had some good moments and things like that. And then there's other characters, like there's Maya, who is with Fisk, who is a decent character. A lot of other characters, really all the characters were done really well, but the main focus characters I think were the best in this book. You have Peter and MJ and their relationship, which was really good. You have Fisk, who was done really well. Peter himself, his interactions with Yuri, all that stuff, all that was really excellent, and I really enjoyed it. You know, the way they related to the plot and the plot itself, all that stuff was good. But I think the highlight for me was definitely the character interactions and everything. But I did enjoy just the general story this book told. It's kind of a little bit of a mystery for the characters, because they're trying to figure out, you know, who is behind all of this, and then eventually it becomes more of a mystery also for the reader, because, you know, the reader generally knows who is involved in all these things, but they don't exactly know why. So it's kind of this unraveling mystery over the course of the book, which was pretty interesting. And just to go a little bit deeper into some of the stuff that I've already talked about, because I was editing this video and I realized I probably should talk a little more in depth about some of this stuff, because I do have some slightly more in-depth thoughts. When it comes to Peter, I think this book did a really good job of portraying that balance of trying to be Peter Parker and also trying to be Spider-Man, which is one of the core things with Spider-Man. And I think this book did a really good job with that. You know, he's trying to balance his relationship with MJ, who is trying to be involved in some of these things that Peter as Spider-Man is being involved with Fisk, especially because he's wrapped up in all this imposter stuff. And she's, you know, getting involved in that, and he's trying to stop her from doing that, but she, you know, doesn't want him to stop her from doing that. She wants to be able to be her own person and do her thing. And it also, you know, dealing with his job and all these things, but also trying to balance that with, you know, being Spider-Man and trying to figure out, especially again with the MJ thing, which was probably my favorite subplot in this book, probably, of like trying to let the people in his life do what they want and need to do, but also having that feeling of if they get too involved in this, it could harm them, and trying to balance that while also making sure that, you know, their relationship's good and all that stuff. And I think that was a really good aspect of this book. And you had a lot of other stuff like that as well. You had the relationship between Maya and Fisk, which was interesting, and then the Blood Spider guy and Fisk and Maya, and all this stuff. Peter trying to do his work, which Spider-Man stuff is interfering with, because he's always out being Spider-Man, and he's always coming in late to work, and he's always tired and all this stuff. So just a lot of those character dynamics were really well done. Other good stuff in here, there was some good action scenes in this book. Of course, it being a Spider-Man book, there's a lot of action. Not as much as I would have expected. There was actually a lot of downtime in this book that was just dialogue and things like that, which for some people, if you're going into this expecting a really action-packed adventure, might be a little disappointing, because even though there is a good amount of action in here, it is not by any means the majority. But the action that was here was really good, and I think it really captured the feel of, you know, Spider-Man fighting people or whatever. And that was really good. And yeah, that's most of the good stuff I have to say about this book. Really, I think across the board, most things in here were done really well, and I really enjoyed, but especially, again, the characters. I think David Liss really got the characters really right in this book, and the plot was pretty enjoyable, had some interesting twists and turns, and was generally just a really fun read. I think In terms of pure fun factor, how much I just enjoyed reading this book, the characters and the plot, even though I think they're really good, are not the best thing I've ever read. But in terms of pure fun factor, this is definitely one of the best books for that I've read this year, honestly. I think it was just a lot of fun, and I read it really quickly. I only read it in a few days because I was just really into it. As far as negatives that I have for this book, there's not really that much that I can think of. Again, I don't think it's the best characters, the best plot, especially the plot. I think, it's a good plot, but it's not amazing or anything. It doesn't compare to some of the other books that I've read for sure, but it's still pretty good. So even then, that's not a huge issue for me. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this book. It's one of those where it's kind of similar to some other books that I've read. For example, one that comes to mind is Star Wars Red Harvest, where, the characters and the plot might be, pretty good, and I think they were better in this book than they were in that one. But the thing that I really enjoyed about this was just the pure fun factor. And I think, that came down to a lot of reasons. It was, the characters were fun to read. There was some fun action scenes. I enjoyed seeing where things from the video game came from. There was a lot of good backstory, all that kind of stuff. And it was just an enjoyable book to read. It was quick. It's a pretty short book. It didn't take me that long. It was just a quick, fun read that I enjoyed a lot. So, as far as a rating out of 10 that I would give this book, I would give it a 9, which again is mainly due to that enjoyment factor, that pure fun factor. If I were rating it more based on, how deep the characters and the story and the themes and all those kinds of things, it wouldn't be that high. But in terms of, my pure enjoyment, which is typically what I go off of when I'm rating these books, I would give this a 9 because I did really have a good time with this. And I think that if you are a fan of either Spider-Man or specifically the Spider-Man video games by Insomniac, I think you'll enjoy this book. It's one of those stories that I think wouldn't be justified in a video game, so I can understand putting it into a book. But it's kind of, I think it's comparable to like maybe an extended, maybe DLC campaign, or, I could see something like this for maybe like a prequel video game or something like that. It's a story that is not maybe as vital in some ways as, the main video game stories, but it's still one that I think is worth telling and worth experiencing. Especially if you are, like me, a big fan of those games. So, that is pretty much all I got to say about this book, so let me know down in the comments if you have read Hostile Takeover and what you thought of it. I would love to get my hands on the Miles Morales book. I forget the title of it, but there is also a tie-in book for that game that came out a while ago, but I unfortunately was not able to get it. But I did manage to get this one, so I'm at least happy about that. But I would like to read that Miles Morales book sometime, so if you've read that one as well, let me know how that is down in the comments. So that is pretty much it for this video, so thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.